technical issues. In Paris, they're having a studio experience, and in Graz, they've got a traditional African musician going to be there with them. So today, what we're going to be discussing is about allyship. Our panel are going to be sharing their career stories with us and those challenges, how they overcame those challenges. And we're going to be discussing as well, how do we nurture Black talent, not only in LinkedIn, but elsewhere as well, not only for new, but existing employees. I've done enough talking, so I'm going to ask the panel, starting with Dean and Fumi in the room, and then we're going to Stone and Janine to introduce yourself. So Dean, can you introduce yourself, please?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I'm Dean Okai, the chair of ADPAC, which is the African Diaspora Public Affairs Committee. So we're an advocacy group. We're a training group for youth, for leadership, to create effective African and African Caribbean leadership in the UK. So we number here 2,457,549 by way of the census. And contrary to our belief, Black doesn't actually represent us as an ethnicity. It's a political term that means that everybody can access the so-called ring-fenced resources for us. So the 3-inch headlines, just like George Floyd, say they got 90 million. However, the criteria for accessing that funding is highly ambiguous and it doesn't touch the sides. So we are here to inform the terms of reference, to advocate, and to train those to manage projects that specifically benefit that 2,457,549 population.
Thanks, Dean. For me?
I wish I had a big number to quote.
It's us.
I'm Fumi Shania. I am one of the global co-chairs for Big, I guess globally. I was going to say Big EMEA. So excited about today and launching Big in the EMEA region. When I joined LinkedIn 3 years ago, I remember very much feeling like I wanted to be a part of this community, but I very much felt like I was a spectator. And so glad that we could bring it to this region. Day job, I manage a team of CSMs in LTS business. And I'm really excited to have this conversation and to hear so much more from this man sitting right beside me. So really excited. Thank you.
Thanks, for me. We're going to go to Stone because I can see that you're on mute. So we're going to take advantage of that. Stone, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience, please?
Sure. Can you hear me, guys?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So my name is Stone. I lead the Learning and Engagement Sales Organization. I joined LinkedIn 5 months ago, and I'm super excited to be here. So a little bit about my journey. I was born in Africa, a small country called Togo, a French-speaking country. And I left when I was 8, went to France, and I spent 15 years in France, and then moved to Canada. And I spent 17 years in Canada, moved back to France, spent 3 years in France, moved back to Canada, spent another year in Canada. and then I live in the US now since, I've been living in the US since 2019. I've worked in multiple organizations across the globe, in tech particularly, working for different small business platforms. So I'm super excited to be here and really engaged in this conversation because I'm super passionate about the topic and excited to share my journey.
Thanks very much, Stone. And Stone is live from San Francisco. Always wanted to say something like that. So thank you so much for getting up so early in the morning. And now, of course, Janine Chamberlain, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience, please?
Absolutely. First of all, Eve, thank you so much for inviting me to take part in the panel today. Apologies, UK team, that I'm not there in person. My name is Janine Chamberlain. I'm UK country manager, and I also run the Global Clients Program for LTS. Thrilled that we are launching Big in EMEA. Slightly disappointed that it took us until 2022 to launch Big in EMEA. So I'm really happy that we're having this conversation today.
Thanks, Janine. And my first question actually is to you. So in your opinion, why do you believe that allyship is important to underrepresented groups such as Big EMEA?
Yeah, I think I can keep that fairly short. I think as we think about many of these challenges that underrepresented groups face, but specifically when I think about big, specifically when I think about Black talent, it's really important that the dominant, and I really hate that word, but that the dominant voice gets heard in these conversations. And it's not the underrepresented group who really have to drive forward the conversation, the education, the advocacy. And so I think allies play a critical role for us in making sure that we can build that environment that is equitable, where literally everybody can thrive. We need to support each other in that. So that's why I think the dominant voice needs to be heard for us to really affect change, not only in the workplace, but also in the world around us. Eve, you're on mute right now. At least for me, you are.
For me too.
I see someone stepping up to support. It's hard running hybrid events. Yes, you're unmuted again, Eve.
Try now.
Am I still on mute, Janine?
No, we can hear you.
Great stuff. Thank you, whoever came and rescued me. Thanks for that. Janine, a follow-up question to that. You mentioned about the dominant voice, but also you mentioned about uncomfortable conversations. As an ally, you're a great advocate for Catalyst and various other programs. I'm sure there's been times that you've had uncomfortable conversations, and some people don't know what an ally is or how to be an ally. Can you talk into that for us for a few minutes? Thank you.
For sure. Definitely uncomfortable conversations. Luckily, I feel pretty comfortable challenging, and I always feel that that's a role that I sort of need to take on in many different forums. But I think there are a bunch of challenges that you come across as, you know, an aspiring ally. And I think the first thing that comes to my mind is it's a learning journey. I'm still learning. I feel out of my depth all of the time. It's a pretty sensitive sort of area because I will be talking about experiences that maybe I have not had myself yet. I want to represent my voice and not only talk about you've made somebody else feel a certain way or this is what's happening to someone else. So I think it's really, you know, it's like a tightrope. You have to find that balance. And I think some of the things that I've come across, I don't know about some of you, maybe in the audience as well. Denial, this isn't happening. This doesn't happen in our workplace. This doesn't happen in our country. I grew up in the Netherlands. Netherlands is known as a very open-minded culture, but at the same time, there are big challenges in the Netherlands as well. I find the hardest conversations that I've ever had are with my family. Don't know about all of you, but that's always a tricky one. You know, the things that you grow up with, and it's not through bad intentions, but if you've grown up in a certain way, like my parents would have, there are just certain things that are much harder to have that conversation around. So that's a big challenge. And I think the other thing to call out is that I still have unconscious bias. And why I say that is there are biases that I have become conscious of, that were there by the way that I grew up, how I worked, what I've learned, etc. But I will still have unconscious biases, things that I don't spot, things that I don't necessarily see immediately. And so that learning journey becomes even more important, to constantly be okay to receive criticism, really reflect on how I might have shown up or what's been happening, and then being able to make my voice heard in a really authentic way. I think the last few years have been quite transformational for me on the topic of race specifically. If you go back a few years ago, the murder of George Floyd, obviously that created a whole sort of wave of action. And maybe I was late to the table, but for me, it was that moment where I learned that it wasn't okay to just not be racist and not have certain beliefs. If I wasn't talking about it and actively moved myself into being an anti-racist, it wasn't enough. It wasn't going to drive that change. And that was a big learning moment. And as you asked, that's when you get into those uncomfortable conversations. I was thinking about something else. Yesterday, some of you might have been in the call with Emma Beery, the author, and she was talking a lot about her experience growing up in Ireland. Somebody put in the chat at some point, quote unquote, funny how all of these experiences are the same across Europe. And it really resonated with me, because I dare say that if I talk to, other people in different European countries, and we talk specifically about the topic of diversity, inclusion, and how we drive this forward, I think there's a perception that it's not the same in every country, that countries have different challenges and different ways of going about things. So it was really interesting to hear somebody say, wow, we all have the same experiences, no matter where we live in Europe. And I think that's the conversation that we need to continue to drive, to make sure that there's awareness around that.
Thanks so much, Janine. And there's so much that we can pick from what you've just said about, some people are ignorant and say it doesn't happen here, or it's not my problem, but it's how to shift that needle from being alarmed about the murder of George Floyd to where it is today. I'm going to bring in Dean in regards to allyship as well. Just following on from Janine's conversation, why is allyship important to underrepresented groups?
I think, so I'm merely going to speak from an African Caribbean, and let's say for all intents and purposes, Black. First of all, we have to define what an ally actually means. There is a misapprehension that it's a title. It's not. It's like somebody bestowing me with the title of manager. And I come into the room with all of my anxieties, complexities, neuroses, and behind my back they say, the damage is on his way. But he's been given the title that he's a manager. And I come in and I Forrest Gump my way through the room, and I'm a damager. So there has to be a function element to it. And we saw this with the pledges from the corporations. We're going to give 10 million to Black. Remember, there's no Black, is there? We're going to give 5 million over the course of this. None of these pledges actually needed to happen. There were 3-inch lines on a page, which was fantastic free PR. They would have all said they were allies. You see, in order to be an ally, we have to have conversations. And the uncomfortable conversation is when it happens with the actual beneficiaries of the allyship, because we actually define what those terms of allyship are. And we may have a criteria. The first is listening. The first is understanding our challenges. So I may come in a room and say, I'm hungry, and you say, I'm going to run away and get you food. And you come back and you've got this plate with bacon and eggs, but you didn't wait. Because I understand the dominant conversation, but I don't eat bacon. I don't eat milk. And we needed to have a conversation, because we have all these preconceived ideas of what the problem actually is. So in our small Black circles on WhatsApp and in any messaging group, we say, it's the same condition across the entire globe in our African experience. Please, ally, listen to this. There are no nuances in terms of law enforcement. It is exactly the same, verbatim. Now, if I were a white woman, why the hell would I have a clue what it was like as a Black man, woman, or child to actually be stopped by law enforcement, to have prejudices in the classroom where I'm excluded, where my English counterpart can go way off the scale because they're bold and I'm outspoken. So first of all, it's based on the nuances that we experience as a people. And like you say, you're learning. I'm learning about us, which means, and I'm an analyst of us in some 140 Black WhatsApp groups, 250 Facebook groups, knowing thousands of us from hundreds of meetings in tens of thousands of hours. And I learn every day. Now, I don't expect anybody to take that on board necessarily. However, you've got to have a minimum level of understanding about what our needs are. Because I can run away and say, well, I'm going to do this because I've seen that. So yeah, but that's not the need. That's not the greatest need at the moment. It's not what's going to make an impact and benefit us. And here's something else about us, and I'm going to be succinct in my closing. What we do, because we are the hard to reach, is we react to budgets. So somebody throws up £10,000 and some shrewd individual comes along and they react to what the criteria of that budget is based on how we say the ally says they want to help. That's not the need. And then what happens is an initiative happens, low impact, low value to the 2,457,549. And we say, but all that energy and effort went into it, but you're ungrateful. So, hey, it's conversation. And conversations are based on respect. And the key thing about any allyship is the first thing it is based on is respect. And then reciprocity starts to take place. And honest and open conversations start to take place. And honest and open conversations have value. And everything else is just vacuous intellectual masturbation. It's great as we leave the table. However, it is pretty much vacuous. Allyship starts with respect.
Thanks, Dean. Thank you. Femi, as one of the global co-chairs, I'm going to put that same question to you. And then Stone, just to let you know, we're going to switch it up a little bit and ask you about your career and how allies and mentors have interwoven in your career. So first, Femi, in regards to allyship.
So I don't know that I could build on too much of what Dean has said, but for me, allyship is the respect. It's that creating space where people can share their lived experiences in a way that's received well. And an example of that is the Emma Dabiri event that we had yesterday as part of Black History Month. And I just remember, being a participant in that. I've been really taken. There was a moment where I felt really joyful that the vast majority of people in the room were non-Black people, right? And the questions that they were asking, the curiosity, and people saying, I've read the book, I feel as if I have a bit more understanding of the experience that we've had. That to me is allyship, is the curiosity about other people's lived experiences. And yeah, the respect, giving them the space to be able to have those conversations without judgment. When there's no judgment, I think people are way more open to sharing their lived experience. And Kath's program that myself and Tatiana were on, that was my first experience of being able to discuss my lived experience in a corporate environment. And I think creating more of those opportunities, I think, the business can only thrive from the diverse thought ideas that will then, create. So that's the only thing I would add to that.
Great, thank you. Stone, I know you haven't had an opportunity to talk that much. So it's over to you a little bit about your career, how allies have helped you in your career as, a senior leader in one of the largest tech companies in the world. And also I just want to let the audience know as well, please put your questions in the chat if you're online. If you're in Dublin, there's a watch party there. Have your questions ready because we'll be coming to you shortly and here in Castlewood. So Stone, can you just share with us about your career journey, how allies and mentors has helped you to be where you are today?
Sure. So just to start, I would say that my journey has been extremely rich, and I've been fortunate enough to have allies in in my personal journey to shape my own journey and also get where I am today. So I'm going to frame it in multiple categories because I do believe that it is multidimensional. So when I started my career, I was pretty much focused on being successful and making sure that I was creating the right environment and the right network to be successful. What I didn't realize is that I needed a strategy because, as a member of a underrepresented group, you're not usually the first or the second choice. And if you don't build a network, if you don't educate people around you, if you don't amplify your message, and if you don't promote yourself, and if you don't create the right plan where you have clear strategies of what you want to accomplish, how are you going to get there? How are you going to measure your own success? And how you're going to grow, and how you can share that with your network of mentors or your allies. It's going to be difficult to be successful. So I took myself as a product, to be honest with you, and said, if I wanted to go to market and market Stone, how would I package the Stone brand, knowing that I needed to launch a career and be successful at it? And I've had two major mentors in my career who were extremely helpful. And I'm going to tell you a funny story here. So my first boss felt threatened by me. And because of my competencies, he didn't give me the space to really showcase my talents. And my first mentor realized that and said, Stone, you should come work for me. And I was hesitant first. And I wanted to leave the company, to be honest with you. And he convinced me and said, you should stay here because I do believe that you have a prosperous future ahead of you. So, and he asked me a question. He said, why do you think that you are being perceived as a threat versus someone who could add value to the organization? And my answer was, I do believe that my perspective, given that I've been in multiple countries, I speak multiple languages, and on top of that, I don't have the right accent. It gives me a position of weakness versus others. And at the same time, given the way I was performing, it gave people some mixed views about me. And he said, look, we need to work on that. So he sat me down and he said, look, I need you to put together your career plan. And he helped me frame it. He said, look, I need to know exactly what you want to be, where you want to be there, how you're going to get there, how I can help you. And he was my first ally. I'll never forget his name. His name is Michael Hladen. And he put me in a position to lead the Quebec market, and then gave me the opportunity to lead the entire Canadian market, and put me in a position to launch the #1 accounting solution in the world in Canada on the market with my accent, capable of going on TV, talking about an American product, and giving me that space to feel comfortable to show up as myself versus trying to be someone else, gave me the confidence to be more performant. So that's one phase in my career. The second phase is when I joined Sage. My CEO of North America was a woman. She was gay. And on top of that, she was extremely, extremely focused on results. And when I joined the organization, my #1 message was I needed to triple the size of the organization I was supposed to lead. And again, a little bit of doubt around the vision. And I had someone who's been somehow in a similar position, who understood exactly where I was coming from, what type of challenges I faced in terms of credibility, in terms of being a member of an underrepresented group, and how it could affect my ability to feel confident in my journey. So what she did was she sat down with me and she was very direct. She said, you just joined an organization, you come from the competition, your brain knows great here, but I really believe in your ability to triple the size of this business. So here's what we're gonna do. We're not going to complain. We're going to focus on the tasks that we need to do. We're going to get it done. In 3 years, we triple the size of the business. The main message I want to share here is, one thing is about having the competencies, the abilities, the skills to be successful. If you don't have the right allies to give you all people that you know the ability to perform and the space to be yourself, it's difficult. So along that journey, I realized that it shouldn't be always only about myself. So I started creating a network that is now comprised of 100 leaders across 3 continents, Africa, Europe, and North America. And we've created a group that promotes, Black engineers, professionals, to make sure that given the opportunity that we have in our life to be who we are today, we need now to expand the pool and advocate on behalf of the group. Nobody's going to do it for us, but it's not about creating something against others. It's about creating something with others to expand and drive the engagement that everybody needs to be performing. So that's a summary of my career. I could take 3 hours, but I don't think we have enough time here. So I synthesized it to make sure that I could showcase a few spots in my career that demonstrate how allyship is super important. So just to conclude, I would say, make sure that you educate people around you because it's super important. Make sure that they are amplifying the message that you are giving to them and give them the tools and the abilities to be your advocate. From there, make sure that you always have a plan. What initiatives are you going to carry out? How are you going to measure success? How are you going to own your outcomes, whether they're great or not, and what you learn about it to continue to grow? I think that Castor Wood is again on mute.
Yeah, if you're on mute.
Okay.
Hello, can you hear me? Live from Castlewood, I presume. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, great. Thanks very much for that, Stone, giving a summary of your career, and there's so much that we can learn from there, and the conversation can continue. What I'm going to do now is open it up to the audience. So, Vera, are there any questions in the chat? Pankhurst, Dublin, if you're there, can you take yourselves off mute and on camera as well? And we'll be coming to you shortly with some questions. But whilst that is happening, does anyone in Castlewood, do you have a question or questions for the panelists? Tatiana. Let's go first. So Tatiana first.
I'll take it. Thank you. This is for Janine and for me. My question is, why big? And you can interpret that as you wish. You're both leaders in the business, so I'd love to get your authentic perspective.
For me, do you want to
Can you go first? Yeah.
start?
I'll go first.
Go for it.
Why big? Why not? When the position came up, I, thought of all the reasons why I shouldn't do it. But the one thing that kept on coming to me was, you keep talking about representation for me. So if it's not you, who is it going to be? It'll be another American. It'll be exactly the way things were before. You have to be the change that you want to see. And honestly, that was what propelled me to apply. That's the story I told my interview. And I still feel that every day today. Like, if not us, then who? And I think that's my why.
Thank you. And Janine.
So I guess it's a cop-out if I say why not as well. No, I'm kidding. So incidentally, I was having a conversation this morning around the work that we are doing in the UK office. So I know we're talking about the big launch for EMEA, but if I just may focus on the UK for a second, and how much work we have done to improve specifically our recruitment of Black professionals. And I think we have significantly increased representation in the office. But I'm acutely aware that we need to do more work to make sure that there is an environment where everybody can thrive, where everybody feels like they belong. And I think BIG plays an enormous role in that. I don't want to set aside the amazing work that has been done by many ERGs, but notably our Embrace ERG, which was a bit of a catch-all for a lot of different cultures and a lot of different underrepresented groups. But I'm acutely aware we need to focus very specifically on just improving that sense of belonging within, particularly the London office, but I appreciate this is a sentiment felt across EMEA. So that for me is why BIG is so important to us. Thanks for the question.
Thanks, Janine. Are there any questions in the chat at the moment? So if you're online and if you do have a question, please don't be shy. Please ask your question. I think Tony had a question, so I'm going to run with the mic to Tony.
Eve, we have a question in Dublin after that.
Oh, perfect.
Okay.
So this is probably for Janine and Dean. For Janine, from an internal perspective, what does actually create an action plan for Black succession at LinkedIn look like? From a strategic point of view and from a leadership point of view? And then from Dean, how do you incorporate that into a corporate business? How do you incorporate that information into a corporate business?
Yeah.
So I'll probably ask Janine to go first then, Dean.
Thanks, Janine.
Did you say, Janine? You were asking about succession plans specifically. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think it's a really good question, and I think that we are still working through how to do this really, really well. But like I said, I really believe that the investments that we've made in terms of recruiting and recruiting from a much more diverse pool of talent, I think is significant, and I think you can see that. And so when I think about specifically that succession planning, what we are focusing on a lot is building those relationships with external talent to make sure that we have, if you will, a pipeline as and when different roles, particularly the more senior roles as well, become available. What I've learned over the last many years since we've been focused on this is that it takes time to build those relationships, right? It takes time to create that trust and that confidence that this is going to be a great place for somebody in a senior position to continue their career, or it doesn't have to be a senior position, but I happen to believe that that's where we still need to be doing some of the work. And so in our succession planning, we're really conscious about how do we have representation within the succession pipeline, so that, you know, the leaders of the future will represent a much greater diversity than, you know, what honestly I would say is what we are seeing today. And then Eve, you need to unmute again. Sorry. Not yet. Yeah, no.
Probably should move the plants.
Yes, you're there.
There you go.
Sorry guys, we're
So-
because there's feedback on the other side.
Just so the entire planet has got what I wanted to convey, I'll say it again. So you do an amazing job in getting the desired cohorts in the door. They're here, like in any career path, people become lost. It doesn't matter how great a company is. You get to a point where you feel jaded, and it doesn't matter that this is a global platform. People are individuals who have their own aspirations, and there's no substitute for experience. And we actually had this conversation on Friday when I had my call. For a year, I would sit in a private members club and invite my contacts from LinkedIn and have drinks with them and get a peer education, just for my own selfish means, but it was reciprocal in that I would introduce people to each other and then create reverse engineer solutions for them. And within that network, what I said on Friday was, what would be great is if we could get a Google-style talks here with experienced African and African Caribbean executives at the highest echelons of what they do, to demystify the processes of how they got to where they are. Because what we do is we keep all this stuff a secret because we're competing, right? And we're all competing over limited resources within roles that are limited. So we keep it to ourselves. But you get to a stage where you've been doing it so long and you're so successful that you can just share that unselfishly. And I think, one, there's no substitute for experience. And the power of that is, if you can enable anybody to circumvent the pitfalls that you went through over the course of a decade and give them all of the cheat codes based on the principles you use to get to those floors. Now, in my limited experience, everything is only an equation to be mastered. And once you understand those equations to be mastered, you just adopt them and utilize them. Agree, adopt, apply. But first comes exposure, because exposure leads to expansion. So when you actually have something that goes both ways, you have people that come in at the highest echelons of what they do, that can de-shroud those mysteries, that can get you promoted. And there are transferable skills in every single industry, where sometimes we're forced to look at things in a different way that we would have never looked at to impact on our own careers. So I think bringing in that expertise and having those conversations in LinkedIn would be a very valuable thing for the staff that are actually here. And what it adds to is the staff retention. And I think all firms need to be worried about that in the great leaving that we're seeing happening in all firms, especially as people are becoming more comfortable at home.
Thanks very much, Dean. Did that answer your question,
Yeah.
Tony? Pankhurst, now you've got a question, so if you'd like to unmute yourselves and advise us which panelists you're directing your question to.
Can you hear us?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So we have one question in the audience.
Can you hear me for me? This is a question directed to you as the co-chair. I just wanted to find out, she can't hear me. Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
I just wanted to find out, what is the vision for you for the next year or two for BIG?
I can't remember the exact vision. Sorry. A couple of key things that we're working on this year anyway, over the next 12 months. The first thing is thinking about the TIE acronym that the big members will all be aware of, which is transparency and trust, inclusion and ease. So we've had a lot of feedback from the big membership team to say it's quite difficult to do business with us. It's not very inclusive in terms of programming. It's very NAMA focused. Hi NAMA guys, I can see some of you on the call. And also that, we talked about, Dean just mentioned demystifying, and it was like, music to my ears, because that's a big thing for the community is, how do we navigate big corporation like LinkedIn? So those are three things that we are sort of really going to drill down into, and we have projects aligned to those themes as well. And then on the career piece is that big piece about demystifying. We don't have the answers yet. We're putting a plan together. I may consult with you, Dean, on some ideas for how we can do that at scale, because we're definitely trying to do this at a global level. So I hope that
modular and scalable.
Yeah. Hope that answers your question. I think that was from Steph. I recognize the voice.
We have another question, Dublin.
Oh, yes, please. Is there
Hi,
another
everyone.
question in Pankhurst?
Yes, there's a question here. My name is John and I work in TA in Dublin. I have a question in relation to building on the discussion there around about the vision for the next couple of years. There's wonderful energy here in the room and a lot of nodding heads, and I think really positive sentiment around how we can do more. But I'd love to hear, are there a couple of simple steps that anybody here who's dialing in today can take to help us move from allyship into action to help bring it to life? Because big strategic conversations are one thing, but there's things that we can all do in our daily roles, and we'd love to hear maybe one or two things that you might suggest.
I hope that's the panel, not just to me, but I would say BIG has a huge allyship community, about 1,000 people globally. And so we are working with our allyship leads on a program of work for the next few months in terms of activations you can get involved with, programs you can get involved with, books you could be reading. Like, there's a whole program in place already. So if you are interested, I would suggest that you join the allyship. I think it's big/allyship group ID as a first point of call, so you can receive all those resources. I'll stop there and see if anyone else has any other ideas.
I was just going to say that sounds like a fantastic curriculum, because when you have anything, you need a common understanding. And when you have a curriculum, you create a common understanding for everybody. So when you start from that essential same goal line, then the key is to break it down into tasks and then create projects that are milestoned, because then you're creating measurement and it's actually going to happen. Because in my limited experience, when 1,000 people come in a room, we got 1,000 people together, and it's amazing. As we're all adults, I say it's a bit like having a 10-inch willy, but if it doesn't get hard, it's no good to you, it's no good to her. It's just there. So I can say that, I can't be fired. In any case, so it's amazing potential. And what you have at this stage is amazing potential. And what it requires is a curriculum to create a common understanding. And from that common understanding, you say, this is where we want to end up. You reverse engineer that, you put the milestones in place, and every day, if you've got 1,000 allies, create small tasks that work towards the outcomes of those milestones, and that big outcome you want is inevitable. So then, if that big outcome doesn't happen, it's for a reason. Small tasks, milestones, goalpost. The goalpost is inevitable.
Thanks, Dean. I wonder if Stone and Janine have got anything that would like to add. Stone was nodding his head. So would you like to just add your thoughts to that?
Yes, I would build on what has been said and speak on the small task. From my perspective, if a leader had an annual goal of recruiting at least one person or promote at least one person, that would make a difference. The second suggestion is around reverse mentoring. I went through a program like that was extremely valuable because it gives leaders the ability to be more humble and then listen to people who have a specific experience and being coached on how to engage, how to be more intentional, and how to have clear plans to really drive for the results that are expected. I would say that the third small thing that I would suggest is about participating in groups where we feel uncomfortable. It's always more comfortable to be part of groups that, where everybody looks the same. But if, you can find the opportunity to join a group where you can listen to stories that you're not familiar with, or listen to experiences that are gonna make you feel uncomfortable, I would suggest you do that. It's super valuable.
Can I add something, Eve? And I know you've muted yourself, so I'll give you this opportunity to unmute for the next question. So lots of really awesome things that have been said. I have to be honest, I was writing down so many notes. I actually didn't hear the question properly, but I'm assuming this is how we get started. Where do we learn? Like, I would say, take responsibility. There's loads of books, Google it. There's loads of LinkedIn learning courses, like search for it. But if you want to take a small step, on all of your social media, identify some people that maybe think really differently to you. Look at who you're following right now, who are you engaging with on social media. I'm talking Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and start deliberately following people who have different views to you of the world, so you can learn about their views and also their experiences through that way. that for me would be a really small step that can make a huge difference and really, I think, enrich how you see the world. Castlewood, you're muted at the moment. Yes, you're back.
Thank you. I think Georgianne has got a question. She raised her hand. So Georgianne, if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask your question and direct it to the panelists that you would
Thank
like
you
to
so
ask your
much.
question.
Thanks, Eve. Congrats to everyone on the launch. It's amazing to see. My question is for leadership and in support of all of those of us that get involved in ERGs. This is hard work, really hard work. And especially if you're a member of the underrepresented group, you don't get the luxury of just being able to do your day job and go home. You have this as well. So my question to Janine, and maybe if there are other leaders in the conversation, is what's being talked at leadership level? I know we've done a lot over the last year in terms of bravos and recognition, but I'd love to understand what else is being talked at just to take some of that burden of the folks that are doing this job that is just really hard work.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in, Georgie, and thank you for bringing that up. It's not just hard work, it's draining. It like drains your energy because you're repeating your messages so many times over. Something I'm really proud of that LinkedIn do, you call that bravos. There is a, I don't know what's the right word, I want to say, there's a monetary sort of amount that ERG leaders actually receive off the back of being in that position and doing that work. But I don't personally think it is about money, and it's not really about that way of kind of rewarding people. I think this is where our allyship program that LinkedIn also runs just generally across the board is probably one of the most critical parts, so that it isn't just ERG leaders and it isn't just ERG members and it isn't just members of underrepresented groups, but it really becomes reliant and the responsibility of the whole allyship community, particularly leaders. And so something to know is that leadership at LinkedIn are held accountable for their actions, whether it is around the environments they create, whether it is around their recruitment practices, their development practices, etc. This is something that is discussed, and it's a top priority for the organization. So I believe it's about kind of sharing the burden, or actually removing the burden, and let some of the other people kind of take that and run with it. But I think we do quite a lot to support, and Georgie and everybody else who is on the call today, if you have other ideas how we can make that better, like I would love to hear them, and I know there's a lot of willing listeners who want to hear about that too.
Hopefully you can all hear me. Good. Okay, very quickly, are there any further questions in the chat, in the room, in Pancas? Because I believe we're at time. I've got about 5 minutes. So is there a quick question here in Castlewood at all that like to put to the panel? Or Pancas?
We have a question in Dublin. Can you hear us?
Okay, Dublin, yeah.
Yes.
Who's your question to?
Just a second.
My question is to everyone, and it's about the future. So Leon here from the talent acquisition team in EMEA, and it's about the future. So about raising kids. I'm a new father. I have a 6-month-old black kid. So I would love to hear from maybe Tian. You know, how, I'm not sure if you're a father or not, but if you're talking to fathers, what kind of suggestions and tips would you give them in regards to raising a black child in this world? And then from Janine, if you have child or not, if you're planning, or if you're talking to parents of non-black kids, how would you like them to be raised in regards to, you know, being aware of, to be the best person they can be?
Dean, do you want to go?
Yeah, absolutely, since I have some limited experience. I think the first thing is for you cognitively to know that you want to raise the type of child that you want it to be. That informed my parenting. And I'll tell you a story. When my son was 4, I'm creaming him out of the bath, getting him ready for school, and he's messing about, he's running everywhere, and I smacked his bum. And he looked at me with such a look of betrayal. And it was pure betrayal. I felt like human fecal matter. I said, oh, God. I remember I would be hit out of anger or frustration, and I said I would never lay my hand on him again. And what it did was, it forced us to have conversations. So we reason about everything. He is as articulate as me. He is as bold as me at 15 years old. And he is as aware of his inalienable rights in every room as me. And one of the things that we do sometimes as parents is project on our children who we want them to be, rather than looking at who is there and encouraging that key talent that they have, or that key passion that they have. And that's what makes them happy, as it does us in our careers. And it's not about us anymore. It's about who's in front of us. And the key thing to understand as a parent moving forward is, if you have a contract with yourself, like that reverse learning, that you're learning as much as your child from them as they're learning from you, you'll be fine. Otherwise, you can get to a position where you say, I'm the parent and you're going to do this. And what you do when you do that is you're actually training them to fear, obey, and conform in society. And this is how we reduce our children to becoming those complicit with things that don't serve their interests, rather than serving their creativity and their growth and their self-expression.
Please.
How do I follow that, Dean? So I have a 12-year-old son and I have a baby girl on the way. So I do think a lot about bringing up children. And I guess the first thing that comes to my mind is, when I grew up myself, I would say that I grew up in a very liberal household. My parents ran a cleaning company. Sorry, this is maybe a little bit lengthy. I'm going to make it short, but they ran a cleaning company. And so they employed people from literally all walks of life. And I was raised with the concepts of, like, everybody is equal and you treat everybody with respect. And I think that's awesome. But there wasn't space to talk about things. So if I came home and I said something that my parents would disagree with, it would just be dismissed and you wouldn't talk about it anymore. And that was that. And so it took me a long time to learn how to talk about these uncomfortable things and to kind of ask the questions about what I might not understand and what I want to learn about. So what I try and do with my son is that we do talk about these different things, and that there is space for him to ask questions about certain, concepts, topics, experiences that he does not understand. And in that way, I hope to make him, the best possible human that he can be. And I think that I don't know if this, resonates with other parents of teenagers for sure, but I think teenagers, well, my son is just before teenage, but they have pretty open conversations about all of these different things that are happening in the world. And I'm sometimes blown away with the things that he comes home with, where he already has such an understanding of racism. He has such an understanding of sexism and things like that. So I'm always quite impressed. And as you said, Dean, like, learning also from him how he's experiencing the world today. But yeah, for me, it's just about making sure that everything can be discussed. Even if I might not agree with it, we can have a conversation about that, but never kind of dismiss anything outright.
And agree to disagree.
That's so hard.
It is. You got to be peace with it. God bless you. When he's 13, you might have to.
Okay. Thanks very much, Janine. We are on time. I can't believe that we actually finished on time. Hopefully everyone can still hear me. Thumbs up, Janine. Yeah.
Yes,
okay,
we can hear
good.
you. And can I say one thing, Eve? I don't know if anybody knows this, but Eve's been at LinkedIn for like 9 or 10 months, and here she is making this massive impact, leading this session. So I just wanted to call that out, Eve. You're doing a brilliant job. Well done.
So much. Despite the tech problems, thank you. I just quickly want to wrap up and want to thank the panel. We got Dean from my Stone is still online. I hope Janine. I want to thank the team. I want to thank the audience. We have got a feedback form in the chat. So please do put your ideas, not only about the panel today, but where you want to be a part of the big journey in EMEA. Remember, it's Shop and Chill at 4:30 here in London. In Dublin, they've got a choir, rock solid worship team. There is a Zoom link so we can watch them on Zoom as well, and they're going to have a happy hour, and we have a happy hour here as well. So thank you again for your time today. I hope you found it informative. Until next time, peeps, take care.